thanks a lot, and tell the committee we guarantee you a successful convention, and we guarantee you that the Democrats are going to select a winner in 1988.
Commissioner Michael Lomax will be next.
Thank you, Paul. We're delighted to have you here. We know it's a great decision, and let's get to work on it.
And representing the business community, Bob Holder.
Paul, it's a great day for Atlanta. We can hardly wait to have you down, and we're going to do a great job for you here in Atlanta in '88. Thank you.
We also have the Lieutenant Governor, the Speaker of the House, the Chairman of the Democratic Party, and my office has about 400 people in it. And we're very grateful.
Well, if all goes well, we'd like to come down there to Atlanta tomorrow and execute that contract and get on with the heavy work ahead of us. We'll be in touch with you on the details.
Well, we're ready to begin, and we await your instructions, and we'll look for you tomorrow.
Great. Thanks a million.
Thank you a million.
And say hello to the committee for us and thank them for us.
You will. Thank you.
Particularly thank Nate Landau. He put a lot of work into this.
Mayor Young, what does this mean for the city?
Well, what it means for the South and for the Democratic Party is that the Democratic Party really understands that to win an election, you've got to really speak to the nation from the heart of the nation, and you've got to carry the South, the Midwest, as well as the North and West. And I think that Atlanta is an international city, its business community, the facilities at the World Congress Center will have an opportunity to really show the world that Atlanta's great in '88. Our expressways will be completed. We should have a new annex on City Hall. Underground should be open. MARTA will be going to the airport. AT&T, IBM, Bell South will be in their buildings. Bob Holder's buildings will be operating. I'm allergic to such success.
Ladies and gentlemen, President Carter and Mrs. Carter, and the President of the United States and Mrs. Reagan.
It's a thrilling and gratifying sight to see the beautiful crowd in front of us, and also the beauty of the great city of Atlanta off in the distance. We're indeed lucky to have a state capitol like this, a place to locate this presidential center and 30 acres of beautiful land. And we're also fortunate to have a great mayor of Atlanta to come and give welcoming remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Mayor Andrew Young. God bless you, man.
President and Mrs. Reagan, President and Mrs. Carter, on behalf of the citizens of this city, we really and truly welcome you to our city. On behalf of those people who come through our city, from the east and the west, from the north and the south, who pass by on one of the greatest highway systems anywhere in the world, we welcome all of them to our city. We welcome those who come through the world's busiest airport to stop by and see how we get along here in the city of Atlanta. And we're convinced that you have made a wonderful contribution to the ongoing life of this city and of this nation, for you bring government of the people back to us, the people. You bring us back the problems, the great causes, the sense of vision which you shared with us as president, and you allow us, young and old, rich and poor, to grapple as citizens with those issues and to be a part of the greatest democracy on the face of the earth. We welcome this library and all for which it stands. God bless you.
Again, very nice. Beautiful.
But I would ask you today not only to hear and to cheer, but I would ask you today to join in the struggle by making a contribution to the African National Congress. A contribution that I would think would be roughly equivalent, should be roughly equivalent to what you spent on your last date or what you figure you might spend on your next one. And we could make a significant contribution to feeding the hungry, to clothing the naked, to combating the $12 million of propaganda per year that the South African government spends in the United States alone to project its cause of racism and white supremacy. And so we welcome Oliver Tambo to our city, for we know that his struggle is really and truly our struggle, and that if racism is allowed to succeed in South Africa, it only gives encouragement to those who have still not accepted the significant strides that we have made through our struggle and our nonviolent revolution here. And so, Dr. Tambo, we are grateful to you and to all of your staff and to the millions of others that continue to wage a struggle for freedom and justice. We join with you in that struggle. We share with you our prayers, our money, our political strength and power. And we celebrate with you today, a day in the not too distant future, when you too might run your cities as we run ours. Thank you very much.
We have all of us here this morning, the journalists no less, lost a brother.
Even though we may have come over on different boats, I think we all somehow respect and admire at least the hope and the promise that Statue of Liberty holds for all Americans and all the world. Tom would want things to go on as usual. He'd be terribly embarrassed that he interrupted the day of so many important people. And he would wish that we would get on with this. And he, of all people, would feel like this is totally unnecessary. He was not here for any praise or recognition. In fact, nobody hid from the press like Tom, except when it was his responsibility to make available to the press some insight and understanding of the movement. It was extremely important that someone with his credibility and understanding of the needs of journalists came to work with Martin Luther King and stayed on to work with all of us. He didn't make a distinction between working in City Hall or working for SCLC or working for the King Center. He didn't care who paid his salary. In fact, he didn't even care if he got a salary. He basically worked where he thought the movement needed him. And in that sense, his work, whatever it may be determined or defined or described by its job description, was, in the finest sense of the word, a Christian vocation. It was a calling. It was a ministry. It was an understanding that if only people in Shenandoah, Iowa, who are good people, but who really didn't have much experience or exposure to Black America and to the problems of the poor and the oppressed of the world, if only they could be made to understand, these good people whom he knew and loved, who he was one of, would really respond to the problems of justice in the world as the moral issue that it was, and their political decision could make a difference. That was all too prophetic, because it was really Iowa and Senator Hickenlooper that essentially began to understand that and swung some Republican votes in the Midwest to end a filibuster that gave us civil rights bills in 1964 and 1965. And Tom always understood, and I think he always believed, that Shenandoah, Iowa was the center of the universe, and that they had produced something there that could change the world. And he saw himself as an emissary of all of those good and wonderful American values that all people needed to share. And he saw the civil rights movement and the press as a team that could communicate those values to the entire planet. And so he was there in our midst, always trying to make sure that the things that we said, that we could say so eloquently and emotionally to each other, he was always there trying to help us translate them so that the eloquence and emotion and passion for justice could be understood in Shenandoah, Iowa. For he knew if it were not understood in Shenandoah, Iowa, no matter how much beating of breasts and gnashing of teeth, there would really be not much change in the United States of America. And so he really was far more valuable as a person born white in a small town in middle America than any of us really gave him credit for. And he never sought to give us an answer. He only sought to raise questions. And in the constant raising of questions, he saw to it that the message that we were living and teaching was communicated to the entire world. I think if Richard Nixon had had Tom Offenberger as a press secretary, there would have never been a Watergate. For he understood that the only thing you can and must do with the press is tell them the truth and the whole truth and nothing but the truth. And that a politician is better served by the truth than anything else, because he knew the minds of reporters. And the minds of reporters would always conceive of far more damaging and dirty stuff than anything that politicians could make go on. And so that openness and honesty that he shared was very consistent with the teaching of Martin Luther King and the understanding going all the way back to Gandhi that we would essentially earn and deserve our freedom through the process of truth force, that it was the force of the truth that would set men free. And he saw himself as a servant of that truth. Yes, he was a servant of Martin Luther King. He was a servant of the United Nations. He was a servant of Ralph Abernathy. He was a servant of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. He was a servant of the city of Atlanta. But most of all, he was a servant of the truth. And he knew that the truth, and only the truth, would make us free. And so we in the movement and in Atlanta and at the United Nations were well served by Tom Offenberger. Now, he didn't say the truth would make you happy. And there's almost nothing that I said that ended up being a big flap that Stoney and Tom and Ralph and Joe and Bevel and Jose hadn't always been saying around the movement for years. It's just that when you got to the UN and began to say them, people weren't used to hearing the truth at the UN. South Africa is an illegitimate government. It was then, it still is. The British still have problems with racism. We still either will learn to live together as brothers or we'll perish together as fools. And so the truth of Martin Luther King, as shared with the world through the press skills and sensitivities of Tom Offenberger, has made a far more valuable contribution to the lives of all of us, to the life of this city, to the life of the movement, and to the life of the nation than any of us will ever imagine. We celebrate the life of Tom Offenberger, and we will continue as an open and honest force for truth, no matter what our offices, no matter what our positions, no matter where we are in the political spectrum. That much we understand. It's the truth that has set us free, and we thank Tom for helping us to communicate the truth of this movement and the truth of our lives through the press to the world at large.
Mr. Mayor, will you raise your right hand? I, Andrew Young, do solemnly swear that I will faithfully and impartially demean myself as mayor during my continuance in office. I have not, in order to influence my election to this office, directly or indirectly, expressly or impliedly, promised my vote or support to any person for any office in the city government of Atlanta, nor for any other office. I will not knowingly permit my vote in the election or appointment of any person to a position in the city to be influenced by fear, favor, or affection, reward or hope thereof, but in all things pertaining to my said office, I will be governed by what is my conviction for the public good. I also swear that I will uphold this and support the Constitution and laws of the United States and of the state of Georgia, so help me God.
So help me God. I so swear. Thank you. Thank you very much, Judge Williams and Cantor Goodfriend and Miss Dionne Warwick, who has had to leave to go to our a benefit dinner, I think, for sudden infant death syndrome. And I'd like to say to all of you, including Ms. T. Renee Crutcher, and the pastors and Cantor Goodfriend who are with us, that we're really grateful to you for sharing with us in this occasion. And to take the words from one of Ms. Warwick's songs, that's what friends are for. I'm also particularly glad to be sworn in with this particular council and this particular council president, and to share that swearing in with 3 judges that I have known off and on through the years, who have represented us well and who stay in close touch, pulling together the legislative, the judiciary, and the executive branch, and helping it to function as much like a family as we possibly can. And we do function like a family. In fact, we function just about like me and my wife have been functioning for the last 31 and a half years. We get along just about like my brother and I do, and just about like my son and I. We argue once in a while, and I get lectured to just like my mother lectures to me. And in many ways, I think it's because we are a family, and because we like each other, even when we disagree, because there's so much more that we share in common than the issues over which we might happen to disagree at a particular moment. I think that's one of the things that makes serving the citizens of this city a privilege and a pleasure, and one that I have thoroughly enjoyed not only these 4 years, but in every other capacity that I have been able to work with citizens of this city and serve them in some particular way. My life has been uniquely blessed, I think, that you have seen fit throughout the years to give me the opportunity to take over from the likes of Maynard Holbrook Jackson and Sam Massell and Ivan Allen and Hartsfield, and keep this city moving forward in what I feel to be a very special and God-ordained way.
We're ready for the official ribbon-cutting ceremony.
It gives me a great deal of pleasure not only to welcome the African Travel Association, but to open this trade fair and exhibit, and to welcome all of these beautiful African products to our city.
Now, question.
All right.
That is beautiful.
Approach to the membership in that club? Well, I would answer that we are not the depository of the Non-Proliferation Treaty. Non-proliferation, that's to say, to prevent that more countries in the world acquire nuclear weapons, is a tremendous diplomatic task, important for the safety of all, and it is a task conducted by the foreign governments of different states. We have one role in this, a very important one, but it is limited. We have the role of verifying through our inspection that countries which have submitted nuclear installations are respecting the obligations they have. So we do not testify. We're not an intelligence organization, nor are we a police organization. And therefore we are not very keen to say that this country is a threshold country or not. The public knows, of course, that there are a number of states that have not submitted the whole of their nuclear program to safeguards, and that some of them may be advancing towards a weapons capacity, but it's not our business to inform about that.
Margaret Ryan.
Well, Dr. Blix, I think a lot of the protest about commercial nuclear power comes from people linking uses of weapons to the peaceful uses. And safeguards is always given as one of the reasons people should feel confident that's not happening. In view of your statement there, what assurances can the public take? Where can the public turn to if they want to find that peaceful uses are possible without necessarily linking to weapons?
Well, you can have nuclear weapons without nuclear power, and you can have nuclear power without nuclear weapons. In fact, in all the nuclear weapon states, they started with nuclear weapons. And it's a question of political will, really. Any country today with a sufficient infrastructure and will and money could go for nuclear weapons. It would take them some time to do so. So the most important thing is to create the political will, to create such political conditions that countries do not feel the need to go for nuclear weapons. And that requires a policy creating détente in different regions. And I think that is, the world has on the whole been very successful in this regard. President Kennedy predicted a world of some 20 nuclear weapons many years ago, and we are still at 5 who openly have it. So I think this is probably one of the most successful efforts at arms control that we have seen. And the safeguard system, the verification, is an exceptional system that has been mounted. It is the first time in the history of states that sovereign governments have invited an impartial international organization to come and verify on their territory that they are not using any of the fissionable material for weapons purposes. So it's a very encouraging example. That doesn't mean that it's foolproof, that there could not be some state that proliferated. But I think it's far more likely that such a thing would happen outside safeguards than inside safeguards.
Dr. Bleeks, that's all the time we have. Thank you very much for joining us on this edition of World Chronicle. Our guest has been Hans Bleeks, the Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency. He was interviewed here at United Nations headquarters in New York by Vyacheslav Chernyshov of the Soviet news agency TASS, Margaret Ryan, Chief Editor of Nucleonics Week, and Tony Edigo of the News Agency of Nigeria. I'm Michael Littlejohns. Thank you for joining us. We invite you to be with us for the next edition of World Chronicle.
Transcripts of these interviews may be obtained without cost by sending a stamped, self-addressed envelope to World Chronicle, United Nations, New York, New York, 10017, room 1061. World Chronicle is broadcast worldwide in developing and developed countries and features guests whose work is concerned with major global issues. This program is a public affairs presentation of this station from United Nations Radio and Television and the Division for Economic and Social Information.